So today we're making mushrooms. Specifically, we're boiling our mushrooms. A lot of us have been told that when you process your mushrooms, when you cook them, they are not allowed to touch a single drop of water. But in my experience, I found that not to be correct. And so today we're going to explain why it works to boil your mushrooms. Today we're cooking with 3 types of mushrooms, the shiitake, the portobello, and the oyster. These are shiitake mushrooms, which is the Japanese word for them. They are, however, Chinese in origin. I like to take off the tough part at the end, but this stem is totally edible, and I would throw that into the mix also. If anything, it gives you a little bit of textural contrast. So mushrooms, because of their cell structure and the way this fungus is set up, in between all these fibers are big air pockets that are filled with air and eventually with whatever liquid that it comes into contact with. That's a lot of the reason why some people say don't soak them in water. But if you were to throw a dry mushroom that is filled with all these pockets like a sponge into a pan with hot oil, that oil is just going to get absorbed almost entirely. So you add a little bit more oil. You keep adding oil and you keep adding oil just to prevent it from sticking. What ends up happening is these mushroom sponges soak up all of that oil, and then you get sort of a bit of a greasy mess. So what we're doing here is actually a bit of a reverse of that. But we're first going to be boiling it to saturate these mushrooms with water so that that sponge is filled to the brim. And then we're going to introduce oil. And the good thing about oil at the end, just a little bit, is to help it brown. The second is a portobello, which is very steak-like. It's very robust in flavor, a lot more earthier. Some people actually, my parents, for example, find portobellos to be a little bit too aggressive. I'm going to cut this one into 9s. They do leak a lot of a dark brown liquid and have that earthiness. So when they're complemented with shiitakes, which are somewhere in between, and oyster mushrooms that are a little bit lighter and sweeter, it's going to create a nice fungus mix. And then the oysters, when they come in, just peel them into sizable shapes. If they're a little bit too big, just break them up. The natural contours and lines of the fibers of the mushroom will create nice jagged edges for that caramelization to happen. Mix those up, and this is our mix of mushrooms that we will cook in that wok. 2 aromatics today. First is the scallion, and second is the garlic. Unlike most of our stir fries, we're not going to start our cook with our aromatics, and they're only going to be tossed in at the end, which means that their cooking time is going to be relatively short, which means that I want to cut this garlic and this scallion a little bit thinner because it doesn't get to cook for as long. It does get tossed on at the end, and you will be able to see it, so try to keep it nice. So we're washing these mushrooms with water, which is so sacrilegious to very many people who went to culinary school. First of all, I did not go to culinary school, and second of all, I am not a Western chef, so I don't know about those rules, but we're just going to be washing them just like this. But we're washing them, we're not killing them, we're not squeezing them, we're just using water to help us get into all those gills and places that are hard to get into. I'm going to drain this off. Okay, let's start cooking these mushrooms. It's a very straightforward cooking process. In the wok, mushrooms, or skillet, whatever you have lying around. And then we're gonna cover these mushrooms with water, and then we're gonna turn it on. I like using a wok for this recipe, but a skillet works as well. What I like about the wok is its shape, so you don't have to give that much liquid. It also has a large surface area so that water can evaporate, which is something that needs to happen because this liquid is going to be reduced. And finally, the wok itself is non-stick, which means that as these mushrooms get to the bottom of the pan, it won't stick and burn, basically. So the process is simple. All you're doing, covering your mushrooms with water, bringing it to a boil, and letting it cook. At least 15 minutes until all of that water has evaporated and disappeared. Oh shoot, I forgot. As this cooks, feel free to season your mushrooms. I'm using kosher here, so I'm being a little bit generous. Keep in mind all that water is going to be gone, so don't add too much. One of the benefits of this cooking technique is we can season our mushrooms nice and early. Part of the problem with just searing them in oil is if you add salt a little bit too early, the salt will start to draw a lot of moisture out of that mushroom, making it difficult to build a sear. That's not the case here because we have plenty of time for these mushrooms to absorb that salt and get saturated with sort of a delicious brine. This is going to go for a little while, so we're going to hang out here in the test kitchen and see what everybody else is up to. What are you doing? What are you doing, Nick? I'm the old Chinese uncle walking around with my hands behind my back, chopsticks in my pocket, just like taking people's stuff. You know what we should do is we should get a drink. Yes. Surprise. Are you making me a cocktail?
Oh, absolutely. You also
Yeah.
Which feeling like?
This is Harbor, our cocktail resident. Yesterday I had a delicious martini that had pickled mushrooms in it.
Yeah. You want one of those?
Yeah, please.
Absolutely.
Dude, it's so sophisticated. It's so complicated. It's like a little soupy because of the mushroom, in a good way. We'll be drinking a bunch of these tonight after we cook the mushrooms. Yeah. Wait, we need to check if the mushrooms are cooked. Subtle changes. We are halfway through the cook, maybe 7 or 8 minutes. You'll see that a broth has been built of all of the mushrooms that are cooking inside, but also you'll notice that this liquid is a little bit thick. That's starch that comes out of the mushroom that we're coaxing out with the heat and the boiling. It's not just water now. It's like becoming a broth. It's got texture, which is a good thing. If you pick up the shiitake mushrooms, they have shrunk maybe about, I'm going to say halfway, maybe a little bit less than that, 2/3 now. We're going to keep an eye out on this because when it gets to the bottom, you really don't want it to burn. All of that nutrient-dense, flavor-dense liquid is coming out of that mushroom, coaxed by heat and water, and you're gonna get a delicious product. All we're doing here is capitalizing on the deliciousness that's already in the mushrooms and trying to amplify them, but not adding too much, but also by not taking anything away. It's like the essence of the mushroom. I have maybe here about a 1/4 cup of liquid left. It's really quite condensed. We're gonna take it all the way down. I'm still maintaining a pretty high heat, medium high. Because it's a wok, nothing is sticking, but be patient and watch out at this stage. We're gonna wait for basically all of that water to disappear. We'll have a very small window when the mushrooms are still saturated with liquid for us to add oil before it burns because it still has a little bit of liquid in there. After that oil goes in, it's going to start to sizzle and build that nice caramelized crust that we've been missing because we've been boiling it. And then scallions and garlic is going to go in, toss it up. That heat's going to activate all those aromatics. Toss, 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 toss. At this point, you notice anything stuck to the bottom of the wok, you're more than welcome to add a little bit of liquid to release it. But know that the mushrooms are already fully saturated with water, so that flavor has been extracted. If you want to build a little bit of a sauce, this is the time just to add a touch more water into your mushrooms. Take it off the heat, and you'll have these beautifully glazed, ridiculously flavorful Chinese-style mushrooms. So we'll see, maybe some of our friends here in the test kitchen might give this a little bit of a taste test. So boiled mushrooms, salt, garlic, and oil, and scallions.
Wow. Oh, that's so nice.
There you have it. Food 52 Test Kitchen approved boiled mushrooms. If you like this recipe, the simplified version written is on Food 52 and also in the description box below.